The notification arrives at 2:47 a.m. Cupertino time. Apple's VP of Operations reads it twice. The Chinese government has issued a manufacturing prohibition order. Effective in 72 hours, no American technology companies can produce consumer electronics on Chinese soil. The last iPhone rolls off the Foxconn line in Zhengzhou at 11:39 p.m. Beijing time on day 3. After that, the facility goes dark. This is a simulation. But the production numbers we're using, those come directly from Apple's supplier responsibility reports. The supply chain mechanics, documented in industry research, the economic dependencies, verified by trade data. Your next phone upgrade just became complicated in ways you haven't considered. But that's not the most interesting part. The iPhone in your pocket right now, it might be worth more next month than it is today. Not because it's getting better, because of what stops getting made. Most people think the immediate impact would be Apple's stock price. They're not wrong, but they're not seeing the full picture. The first crack appears somewhere unexpected. It's not in California. It's not even in a factory. It's in a shipping port in Los Angeles where a logistics coordinator is staring at a manifest that just became worthless. By week 7 of this scenario, something breaks that even Apple's legendary contingency planning didn't fully account for. It's not the production capacity that collapses. It's not the supply chain that fails. It's what happens when the most valuable company in the world suddenly can't deliver the product that generates 52% of its revenue, and what that does to everything connected to it. Somewhere in Zhengzhou, China, a city you've probably never heard of, 350,000 workers are about to have a very different week than they planned. This is how the disruption begins. Here's the mechanism that makes this scenario possible, and it's simpler than you might think. Apple doesn't own the factories that make iPhones. They contract manufacturing to companies like Foxconn, Pegatron, and Wistron. These contractors operate massive facilities in China. The Zhengzhou facility alone, known as iPhone City, covers 1.4 square miles. It employs 350,000 people working in coordinated shifts. During peak production for a new iPhone launch, the single facility produces 500,000 units per day. The dependency runs deep. Apple produces roughly 230 million iPhones annually. About 90% of those, approximately 207 million units, are assembled in China. Not just assembled there as a matter of convenience, assembled there because that's where the entire ecosystem exists. The specialized machinery, the trained workforce, the component suppliers within trucking distance, the quality control systems refined over 15 years. When the ban takes effect, it's not like relocating a small operation. You can't just pack up semiconductor fabrication equipment and move it to Vietnam. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Apple's Chinese manufacturing network represents the single largest concentrated production of consumer electronics on the planet. The first ripple isn't actually at Apple, it's at their suppliers. A company in Japan makes the ultra-precise camera modules. They ship 600,000 units per week to China. That shipment's scheduled for day 4, canceled. The components exist, the demand exists, but the destination just vanished. A rare earth mineral processor in Inner Mongolia supplies materials for iPhone batteries. They've built their entire processing capacity around Apple's production schedule. They operate 3 shifts. They employ 400 to 200 people. Their primary customer just stopped ordering. Not reduced orders, stopped. Here's what most analysis misses. It's not just about Apple moving production. It's about the 200 plus companies in the iPhone supply chain that are calibrated specifically for Chinese manufacturing volumes. When that volume disappears, the economic ripple doesn't respect national borders. Let's look at actual numbers from Apple's most recent supplier list. The iPhone contains components from suppliers in 43 countries, but the final assembly in China is where it all converges. Without that convergence point, you don't have disruption, you have paralysis. The bill of materials for an iPhone 15 Pro includes roughly 1,000 distinct components. Cameras from Japan, OLED screens from South Korea, modem chips from the US, specialty screws from Taiwan. All of these flow into Chinese factories for final assembly. The logistics are coordinated down to the hour. When you remove Chinese manufacturing, you're not solving a production problem. Now here's the part that surprises people. The first shortage isn't new iPhones. Apple has inventory. They've learned from past supply chain disruptions. They typically keep 5 to 7 weeks of finished product in the channel, enough to buffer normal fluctuations. The first critical shortage? Replacement parts. When your iPhone screen cracks, that replacement screen comes from the same Chinese suppliers that make screens for new phones. Apple stores worldwide stock these parts based on predictable failure rates. They keep roughly 3 to 4 weeks of inventory for common repairs. By week 4, an Apple store in Chicago runs out of iPhone 14 Pro screens. They can't order more because the supplier has stopped shipping. Customers with cracked screens are told the wait time for a repair is indefinite. This isn't panic, it's arithmetic, and it's about to get more complicated. Week 1. Apple's executive team makes a decision in a meeting that lasts 11 hours. They're activating what's internally called Project Contingency. It's not a new plan. Apple has maintained manufacturing diversification strategies since 2019, facilities in India, Vietnam, and Brazil. But those facilities were meant to supplement Chinese production, not replace it. Current production capacity outside China, roughly 23 million iPhones per year. Current demand, 230 million. I mean, the math is brutal. A procurement officer at Foxconn's India facility receives a call at 3 a.m. Apple needs them to triple production capacity immediately. He sends the timeline up the chain. The response comes back in 40 minutes. Accelerate everything. Cost is not the primary constraint. Meanwhile, Apple's retail division is having a different conversation. Current iPhone inventory across all channels worldwide, 11.2 million units. Weekly sell-through rate, 4.4 million units. That's 2.5 weeks of inventory. After that, the shelves start going empty. A decision gets made that's unprecedented in Apple's history. They implement purchase limits, 2 iPhones per customer across all models. It's framed as ensuring availability for all customers. What it actually means, rationing has begun. Week 2, social media notices before the mainstream press. A Twitter thread goes viral. Someone noticed that the iPhone 15 Pro Max in their preferred color is showing unavailable on Apple's website. Not ships in 3 to 4 weeks like during normal high demand periods, just unavailable. The thread gets 890,000 impressions in 6 hours. People start checking. The pattern emerges across specific models and colors. Pro Max models in all colors, limited or unavailable. Standard models, still available, but shipping times increasing. The algorithm picks it up. Suddenly, Apple inventory tracking becomes trending content. Tech YouTubers start posting daily availability checks. It becomes a game. Today's iPhone availability report. Videos get more views than normal tech reviews, but the story on the ground is more nuanced. An Apple Store manager in Seattle gets new guidance from corporate. Don't display phones prominently in store windows. Maintain current display units, but when someone buys one, don't immediately replace it from stock. Conserve display units as long as possible. The optics matter. Empty display pedestals send a message Apple wants to avoid. Week 3. The financial markets have been watching. Apple's stock has been volatile but relatively stable. Investors know Apple has cash reserves of $162 billion they can weather a production disruption. But then the Q4 earnings call happens. Apple's CFO makes a carefully worded statement. We're working to diversify our manufacturing footprint. We expect this transition will impact iPhone availability in the near term. We're unable to provide specific guidance on production volumes for the next 2 quarters. Wall Street hears Apple doesn't know when they'll be able to make enough iPhones to meet demand. The stock drops 12% in 2 days. That's $380 billion in market value. Gone. But here's what the stock price doesn't capture. Apple's market cap dropping affects people who own Apple stock. What happens next affects people who've never bought a share in their lives. A small repair shop in Austin specializes in iPhone screen replacements. They do 40-60 repairs per day. Their entire business model is built on reliable parts supply. They order screens from an authorized distributor who sources from the same Chinese suppliers Apple uses. Week 3, their distributor sends an email. Due to supply constraints, we're unable to fulfill orders for iPhone screens at this time. We'll update you when inventory becomes available. The owner does math he hoped he'd never have to do. Current parts inventory, 180 screens across various iPhone models. Current daily usage, 50 screens. That's 3.6 days. He has 3.6 days to figure out a solution to a problem that doesn't have a solution. He makes a decision that feels wrong but unavoidable. He raises repair prices by 40%, not because he's price gouging, because he needs to reduce demand to match his constrained supply. It's basic economics. It still feels terrible. Within a week, 7 other repair shops in Austin make similar price increases. A repair that cost $149 now costs $209. Customers are angry. Shop owners are defensive. Nobody's wrong. Everyone's trapped by the same math. Week 4. Something unexpected happens in the secondary market. Used iPhone prices start rising. A person in Denver lists their year-old iPhone 14 Pro on Facebook Marketplace for $650. It sells in 2 hours. They bought it new for $999 11 months ago. Normally, it would sell used for maybe $450, but normally you can buy a new one. Right now, you can't. The pattern replicates across every used phone marketplace. Prices for year-old iPhones are climbing towards 70-75% of original retail price. 2-year-old models that would normally trade for 40% of original value are selling for 55-60%. An economics student at UCLA notices this and writes a blog post. The iPhone is becoming what economists call a Veblen good in reverse. Scarcity is creating demand independent of utility. People are buying phones they don't immediately need because they are afraid they won't be available later. The post gets shared in economic circles, then business circles, then mainstream media picks it up. Suddenly, everyone's aware that iPhones might be scarce, which creates exactly the behavior the article described. Self-fulfilling prophecy in real time. Week 5. The first major business impact hits. A Fortune 500 company with 85,000 employees has a standard technology refresh cycle. Every employee gets a new iPhone every 2 years. They're on a contract with Apple for 4,500 iPhones delivered this quarter. Apple sends notification, due to unprecedented production constraints, we can fulfill 30% of your contracted order this quarter. The remainder will be delivered on a timeline we're currently unable to specify. The IT director faces a choice. Deploy 12,150 iPhones to 85,000 employees asking for them, or change the company's entire device policy on the fly. They choose option 3. They extend the current device refresh cycle from 2 years to 3 years. Mandate that phones still functioning adequately don't get replaced. Only replace devices that are broken or genuinely obsolete. 14,000 employees who expected new phones this quarter don't get them. Morale takes a hit. Productivity probably doesn't change, but the psychological impact of not getting the expected upgrade, that lingers. This decision ripples across corporate America. 60% of Fortune 500 companies have similar Apple device contracts. They're all making similar calculations. When 30 million corporate iPhones that would normally refresh this year don't refresh, that's not just Apple's problem. That's the corporate software ecosystem's problem. Apps optimized for newer hardware run slower on older devices. Security updates become problematic on 4-year-old phones. Week 6, a Foxconn facility in Vietnam receives equipment shipments that don't fit through the factory doors. The machinery designed for Chinese facilities wasn't built to the same dimensional specs as Vietnam buildings. Engineers stand in the facility parking lot looking at $40 million of iPhone assembly equipment that can't be installed. A structural engineer gets called in. Can they modify the building? Yes. How long? 4 months minimum. Cost? $12 million. Apple approves it immediately, but the clock keeps ticking. Meanwhile, in India, a different problem emerges. The workforce scaling is ahead of schedule. Foxconn hired 41,000 new workers in 5 weeks. Impressive, unprecedented actually. But the training completion rate is 62%. Of the 41,000 hired, only 25,000 are fully certified for iPhone assembly. The rest are still in training. Quality control on the India lines is running at 91% pass rate. Chinese facilities ran at 99.2%. That difference matters. Each failed quality check is a phone that doesn't ship. At current production rates, that 8.2% difference equals 180,000 phones per week that don't meet Apple's standards. They can lower standards. They won't. That's not how Apple works. Week 7. This is when the secondary effects hit industries nobody predicted. A marketing agency in New York specializes in iOS app development. 85% of their revenue comes from building iPhone apps for corporate clients. Their pipeline is full. Projects booked through next quarter. Then clients start calling. Yeah, can we pause the iPhone app development and focus on the web platform instead? The reasoning is simple. If iPhone sales are constrained, why invest heavily in an iOS-specific app right now? 3 projects get paused. That's $840,000 in revenue, delayed. The agency employs 34 people. Nobody gets laid off yet, but the financial buffer just got thinner. This pattern replicates across the iOS development ecosystem. 400,000 people in the US work in iOS app development. Their livelihoods are connected to iPhone market share. When iPhone availability contracts, so does their economic security. AppleCare subscriptions face an unexpected challenge. People subscribe to AppleCare for device protection. But if replacement devices aren't available, what exactly is the insurance covering? Apple quietly extends AppleCare coverage periods. Instead of 2-year coverage, they're offering 3-year extensions at no additional cost. It's the right thing to do. It also cost them $1.2 billion in additional liability coverage they didn't plan for. Week 8. A hospital in Boston faces a peculiar problem. Their nursing staff uses iPhones for patient care coordination. A custom iOS app integrates with their medical records system. The app doesn't work properly on Android. 23 of their nursing iPhones are failing. Age-related hardware issues, normal attrition. Normally they'd order replacements. They can't. The replacement queue through Apple's enterprise channel is showing 16-week delays. They have 3 options. Wait 16 weeks and work understaffed. Switch to Android and rebuild their entire medical records integration system. Or source used iPhones from secondary markets. They choose option 3, a hospital buying used consumer electronics off eBay. It's not ideal, but it's the option that keeps patient care running. This is happening across healthcare, logistics, field services, and any industry that built infrastructure around iOS devices. Week 10. Apple makes an announcement. They're accelerating production capacity in India, Vietnam, and Brazil. Projected timeline to restore full production capacity, 18-24 months. But they're introducing a new tier of iPhone availability. The iPhone 16, scheduled for September launch, will release in 2 phases. Phase 1, limited launch in North America and Western Europe, significantly reduced quantities. Phase 2, global availability, timeline dependent on production scaling. They don't use the word rationing. They don't have to. Everyone understands what limited launch means. Pre-orders for iPhone 16 open on a Tuesday morning. The Apple Store website crashes within 3 minutes, not from technical failure, from traffic volume. 14 million people trying to order simultaneously. Phones sell out in 17 minutes. All models, all colors, all configurations. 2.2 million units allocated for the US market. Gone before lunch. The next restock? Estimated 6 to 8 weeks. A teenager in Michigan camps outside an Apple store for 31 hours to be first in line for launch day. She succeeds. She buys an iPhone 16 Pro. That afternoon, someone offers her $2,400 for it. She's not a reseller. She wanted the phone. But $2,400 is more money than she's ever had at once. She sells it, immediately regrets it. But rent is due and her car needs repairs. The gray market for iPhones becomes real. Resellers with bot networks are purchasing phones and flipping them for double the retail price. Apple implements 1 phone per Apple ID restrictions. It slows the problem, doesn't stop it. Not everything breaks the same way. A small manufacturing company in Taiwan pivots faster than anyone expected. They normally make Android phone components, but their machinery can be retooled. They start producing iPhone-compatible charging cables and cases, not official Apple products, third-party accessories. But when official accessories are scarce, third-party fills the gap. Within 8 weeks, they've scaled production to 400,000 units per month. They hire 120 new workers. It's not 350,000 jobs like Zhengzhou, but it's not 0. A software company in Austin sees the constraint and adapts. They build a web-based version of their popular iOS app. It's not as smooth as the native app, but it works on any device, iPhone, Android, desktop. User experience drops slightly, but accessibility increases dramatically. 6 months later, 40% of their users prefer the web version anyway. The constraint forced innovation they wouldn't have pursued otherwise. Apple's competitors see opportunity. Samsung launches an aggressive trade-in program. Switch from iPhone to Galaxy. We'll give you $800 for your old iPhone regardless of condition. It's brilliant marketing during a constraint. Some people switch. Not millions, but enough to shift market share by 2.3 percentage points in Q4. In smartphone market terms, that's significant, but not everyone can adapt. A mobile game developer in San Francisco built their entire business model around iOS gaming. Their games don't work as well on Android. Different graphics processing, different screen ratios, different user behavior. iPhone market share drops from 57% in the US to 51% over 3 months. Their revenue drops 18%. They're profitable, but margins are tight. They lay off 11 of 47 employees. The founder makes a calculation. They can survive at current revenue levels for 14 months. If iPhone availability doesn't improve by then, they'll need to either pivot to Android development or shut down. A college student in Oregon has a different problem. She bought an iPhone 13 2 years ago. It works fine, but the battery life is degrading, normal aging. In normal times, she'd get the battery replaced at an Apple store for $89. She calls to schedule the repair. Earliest availability, 9 weeks. The part shortage extends to repair components. She can't wait 9 weeks. She needs her phone for work. She finds a third-party repair shop that has batteries in stock. They charge $140. The battery is third-party, not official Apple. It works, but her phone now shows a battery warning message. She pays it. She's annoyed. But her phone works. These are micro-adaptations, small individual choices that collectively reshape the market. Week 16. The economic data starts showing the aggregate impact. Consumer electronics retail sales are down 8% compared to the same quarter last year. Not just Apple, the whole category. Carriers are feeling pressure. Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile normally subsidize phone purchases to retain customers, but if they can't get iPhones to sell, they can't close retention deals. Verizon offers a customer a free iPhone 15 to renew their contract. The customer agrees. Verizon can't deliver the phone for 11 weeks. The customer switches to a carrier that can deliver a Samsung phone immediately. Multiply that scenario across millions of customer interactions. Carrier churn rates increase 3.4%. That's billions in lost revenue. Apple's services division faces unexpected pressure. People subscribe to iCloud, Apple Music, and Apple TV Plus, partly because of iPhone integration. When iPhone market penetration slows, services growth slows. Year-over-year services revenue growth drops from 12% to 7%. Wall Street notices. Services were supposed to be Apple's cushion against hardware volatility, but services revenue is tied to hardware install base. The cushion is thinner than projected. Week 20. A pattern crystallizes. This is what the technology market looks like now. iPhones are available but constrained. If you need one, you can eventually get one, but the word eventually carries weight. It didn't before. Wait times, uncertainty, compromise. Prices haven't officially increased. Apple maintains MSRP, but gray market prices run 30 to 50% above retail. Third-party repair costs are up 40%. Used phone values are elevated. The App Store economy has adjusted. Developers focus less on iOS exclusive features, more on cross-platform compatibility. Innovation shifted from what can we do on iPhone to what can we do everywhere. Corporate IT departments have extended device life cycles. Employees keep phones longer. The 2-year upgrade cycle became 3 years. Some companies are considering 4. For the average person, the change is subtle but persistent. The phone you have is more valuable. The phone you want is harder to get. The assumption that technology is always available, always improving, always accessible, that assumption is questioned now. A parent in Colorado wants to buy their teenager a phone for their birthday. 6 months ago, they'd walk into an Apple store and buy one. Today, they put their name on a waiting list. Estimated wait, 5 weeks. The birthday is in 3 weeks. They buy a refurbished iPhone 12 from a third-party seller for more than a new iPhone 12 cost 2 years ago. The teenager doesn't know the difference, but the parent does. Week 24. The production crisis stabilizes, not resolves, stabilizes. Apple's manufacturing capacity outside China reaches approximately 95 million units annually. That's 41% of their previous production volume. India is producing 52 million units per year. Vietnam is at 28 million. Brazil contributes 15 million. It's not enough to meet demand, but it's enough to stop the free fall. iPhone availability improves to 4 or 6 week delays instead of indefinite. That's progress, painful progress. Apple makes a strategic decision that becomes permanent. They're not returning to 90% China concentration, ever. The new target, no more than 40% of production in any single country. This means building manufacturing infrastructure that's deliberately less efficient than what existed before. Redundancy is expensive, but dependence proved more expensive. The cost impact, iPhones will cost approximately $85 $120 more to manufacture going forward. Apple absorbs some of that, passes some to consumers. The iPhone 17, when it launches, will start at $899. instead of $798 for the base model. Nobody is surprised. By this point, everyone understands there's a cost to resilience. Part suppliers make similar calculations. A camera module manufacturer in Japan that was 95% dependent on Chinese assembly orders now splits production between 5 countries. Their margins drop 8%, but their risk drops more. The rare earth mineral processor in Inner Mongolia found new customers in the automotive sector. They're still running 3 shifts, but for electric vehicle batteries now, not iPhones. 4,200 jobs that seemed at risk stabilized elsewhere. Not everyone landed safely. An estimated 47,000 jobs across the iOS app development ecosystem disappeared. Not immediately, gradually. Apps that were iOS exclusive became web-based. Developers who specialized in Swift learned JavaScript. Some succeeded, some switched careers. Foxconn's Zhengzhou facility sits partially operational. The Chinese government allowed limited resumption of non-Apple electronics manufacturing. 85,000 of the original 350,000 workers are employed. The rest? Dispersed to other industries, other cities, other lives. The facility that once produced 500,000 iPhones per day now makes components for Chinese smartphone brands. The lights are on, the machines run, but the economic scale that existed before, that's history. Week 36. Apple's market cap has partially recovered. Down 18% from pre-crisis peak, but stabilized. Investors have adjusted their models. Apple is no longer a growth story. It's a resilient, profitable, slightly smaller than before technology company, which, for a $2.7 trillion company, is still extraordinary. Just not what it was. The secondary effects persist in unexpected ways. The iOS developer community is smaller but different, less focused on consumer apps, more focused on enterprise and specialized professional tools. The economics changed, so the ecosystem evolved. AppleCare policies now include supply chain protection language. If a replacement device isn't available within 30 days, customers get extended coverage at no additional cost. It's a permanent policy change born from crisis. Third-party repair shops legitimized themselves during the crisis. Apple fought right to repair legislation for years. After seeing third-party shops keep devices functional when official channels couldn't, Apple quietly expanded their independent repair provider program. Not because they wanted to, because the market demanded it. Medical systems that relied on iOS devices diversified. Many switched to Android. Some built web-based systems that work on any device. A hospital in Boston that bought used iPhones off eBay during the crisis now has a vendor-agnostic device policy. The crisis taught a lesson. Critical infrastructure shouldn't depend on a single hardware platform. Corporate America learned a similar lesson. The Fortune 500 company that extended device life cycles from 2 years to 3 years never went back. They realized employees didn't actually need new phones every 2 years. Productivity didn't suffer. Costs dropped. What seemed like crisis management became permanent cost optimization. The teenager in Michigan who sold her iPhone 16 Pro for $2,400, she bought a used iPhone 13 for $308 or 3 months later, banked the difference, paid rent for 4 months, fixed her car, started a savings account. She still thinks about that phone sometimes, but rent mattered more. Zoom out from 36 weeks of simulation. What does this actually reveal? It exposes something fundamental about modern technology ecosystems. They're built for efficiency, not resilience. They're optimized for scale, not redundancy. They work extraordinarily well until they don't. The global supply chain that could produce 230 million iPhones annually was a marvel of coordination. Thousands of components from dozens of countries converging in Chinese factories with military precision. It was also a system with a single point of catastrophic failure. When that point failed, the effects cascaded through the technology sector, corporate IT, app development, retail, and consumer behavior in ways that were predictable only in hindsight. This isn't about blaming Apple's supply chain strategy or Chinese manufacturing policy. For 15 years, that system delivered the most successful consumer product in history. It worked, until the scenario where it couldn't. The simulation shows that the distance between working perfectly and crisis isn't geographical. It's strategic. It's about choices made years before, optimizing for metrics that seemed smart until they weren't. Remember that last iPhone rolling off the line at 11:39 p.m.? In this simulation, the gap between that moment and hospitals buying used phones off eBay was 8 weeks. The gap between normal operations and permanent industry restructuring was 36 weeks. Not instant collapse, but fast enough that systems designed to absorb shocks couldn't fully prevent cascading effects. The scenario was hypothetical. The mechanisms were real. The dependencies were real. The supply chains were real. The only hypothetical part was the trigger. But here's what the simulation doesn't answer. How many other technology products have similar dependency structures? How many industries have optimized so aggressively for efficiency that they've accidentally built fragility into the foundation? We got global supply chains that could produce 230 million units of a complex device. We got devices that cost less than they should given their capabilities. We got innovation at a pace that seemed impossible. We also got a system where a single policy decision could ripple through the global economy in ways that affected everything from corporate IT budgets to hospital operations to whether a teenager in Michigan could afford rent. Whether that trade-off was worth it isn't for this simulation to judge. There's no objectively correct answer. But now you have more information about what the trade-off actually involves. The new normal costs more, ships slower, and has more redundancy built in. That's not a failure. That's learning, expensive learning. And here's the question this simulation leaves open. How much efficiency are you willing to trade for resilience? Because every technology product you use made that calculation. You just didn't see it until something broke. The distance between everything works and nothing's available might be shorter than a shipping manifest, might be one policy decision, might be 72 hours notice. If this type of economic simulation interests you, the algorithm knows what to show you next. And the question I'll leave you with, could you tell the difference between this simulation starting and normal supply chain delays? Could you spot the moment when temporary shortage became permanent restructuring? By the time you're certain, you're probably already adapting to it.